Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the young wide receivers for 2022 fantasy football, as well as looking out a little bit deeper in terms of how I believe their careers will play out over the next couple of years in terms of Dynasty fantasy football. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my breakdown of the young wide receivers in fantasy football. So we got to begin today's video by just defining what a young wide receiver is in my book. Now, some people might say, Nick, my cutoff would be 24 years old or 25 years old. For today's video, we're going to go with the cutoff of 23 years old for what I would describe as a young wide receiver. Now, there are going to be some wide receivers that will not be talked about in today's video because everyone already knows just how good these wide receivers are. They include Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb. So if you came to today's video wanting to hear about Ja'Marr Chase, Justin Jefferson, or CeeDee Lamb, please make sure that you guys do go ahead and head on over to a video I made a couple of weeks ago titled Top 12 Dynasty Wide Receivers, where I went in depth into each of those players. So we will begin today's young wide receiver discussion with Ja'Marr Chase's teammate, and that is going to be Mr. T. Higgins. T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. In 2021, he played in 14 games, finishing as the wide receiver number 22.5 PPR and the wide receiver number 12.5 PPR points per game, tied with Mike Williams. The reason why in these videos I like to make a distinction between wide receiver finish at the end of the season as well as points per game finish is because the points per game finish to me is what is really important, because if T. Higgins wasn't to have missed a couple of games on the year, then he probably would have finished much higher than wide receiver number 22, which is what the points per game total tells us, which is why I will talk about it in every single video I do on this channel. So last season, he had 140 targets, 7.8 per game, ranking 12th at wide receiver, 92 receptions, 5.1 per game, ranking 13th at wide receiver, 1,400 receiving yards, 77.8 per game, ranking 7th at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns, 16th at wide receiver. Now, last year, the Cincinnati Bengals were phenomenal, right? There was no other word to describe them besides that. They were a team that no one, including myself, I'm not going to go ahead and lie here and tell you guys that I was super high on the Cincinnati Bengals last year. No one was. And they went to the Super Bowl and almost won the Super Bowl, despite the fact that their offensive line was complete and utter dog shit. In 2022, in the offseason, they have made moves to make this offensive line better, and it is entirely possible that in the 2022 NFL Draft, they make even more moves to go ahead and shore up that offensive line even more. So if Joe Burrow was able to perform phenomenally, that's not how you say it, phenomenally with these bad offensive linemen, imagine how good he could do with good or just above average offensive linemen. Now, some people might go ahead and say, Nick, the Cincinnati Bengals were very lucky last season and they got to the Super Bowl based upon luck, blah, 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 and they're not going to be that great in 2022. Now, maybe that's true, right? Maybe they don't go to the Super Bowl. I don't expect them to go to the Super Bowl. Maybe they don't even make the playoffs. But at the end of the day, this offense, as long as Joe Burrow is the quarterback, I am going to be very confident in the wide receivers on the team. Now, obviously, Ja'Marr Chase is the flashy name. Everyone knows Ja'Marr Chase. Now, I was personally someone, just like with the Bengals as a whole, I was not very high at all on Ja'Marr Chase. I was worried about the fact that there were these reports that Ja'Marr Chase couldn't see in NFL football, that he needed those white stripes that are on an NCAA collegiate football in order to see the ball. And when you read something like that, you're just scratching your head. You're like, you know what? He wasn't really performing all that well in preseason. There's a lot of talks out of OTAs, out of training camp, that he's not looking good. And I'm thinking, you know what? He opted out of the 2020 college football season, so maybe there's just some rust on Ja'Marr Chase. And I'm thinking that, man, T. Higgins might be a top 5 wide receiver this year, because while Ja'Marr Chase is great, and I think in a couple of games into the season, he was going to be great, but you know what? That gives enough of a buffer for T. Higgins to truly cement himself as the wide receiver one in that offense. Now, that was obviously wrong because we saw Ja'Marr Chase have a great season, but T. Higgins wasn't just getting slapped around by the fact that Ja'Marr Chase had a phenomenal season, right? T. Higgins was still very involved in this offense. There are going to be games where T. Higgins doesn't have his normal 5 catches in a game, right? Where he maybe only gets 3 catches because Ja'Marr Chase lays a pipe for that ass like he's a plumber on the other team, right? That's going to happen. But there's also going to be the games where Ja'Marr Chase maybe doesn't have as great of a game and T. Higgins is coming out on top. So for 2022 redraft fantasy football, I am very high on T. Higgins. In terms of dynasty fantasy football, I like him even more. He is 23 years old. This is going to be his 3rd year in the NFL, and it seems as though Tyler Boyd is going to be eventually phased out. Now, he's still going to be there in 2022, in 2023, but I think after that, they're going to be able to get rid of Tyler Boyd because they're going to have to pay Mr. T. Higgins, Mr. Ja'Marr Chase, the big bucks. They're going to have to pay these guys a lot of money, and I think that T. Higgins is going to be able to be phenomenal for this team for a while now. Now, Nick, how many times in a video are you going to say phenomenal? Probably 3. I think I've said it 3 times now. Not going to say it again because I don't want to read some comments. Nick, how many times are you going to say phenomenal in the same video? Well, that's number 4. So T. Higgins, again, a excellent wide receiver in a very good situation, and I believe he is the set-in-stone wide receiver 2 on the Bengals, and you could even make the argument that he is the 1B to Ja'Marr Chase's 1A in the Bengals offense. Next up, we move to Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver of the Miami Dolphins, who is 23 years old, just like Mr. T. Higgins. In 2021, Waddle played in 16 games, finishing as the wide receiver number 16 in half PPR and the wide receiver number 21 in half PPR, tied with CeeDee Lamb. He had 142 targets on the season, 8.9 per game, finishing 10th at wide receiver, 104 receptions, 6.5 per game, 7th at wide receiver, 1,015 receiving yards, 63.4 per game, 22nd at wide receiver, and 7 total touchdowns, number 18 at wide receiver. Now, Jaylen Waddle, prior to the Tyreek Hill trade, I was banging the drum aggressively. I was screaming from the fucking mountaintops on how high I was, higher than Elon Musk, on Jaylen Waddle. I loved Jaylen Waddle because he was going to be the clear number 1 threat in this Miami Dolphins offense. This is his sophomore season. Tua Tagovailoa looks like he's going to be able to take that next step up in his 3rd year. They shore up the offensive line. Things are looking chef's kiss, magnifique for Jaylen Waddle. And then, out of nowhere, like an RKO from Randy Orton, the Miami Dolphins decide to hop on the phone. Chris Greer's on the phone. And he's like, you know what? Fuck them picks. Let me get Mr. Tyreek Hill. And now Tyreek Hill is there. Now, what is that going to do to Jaylen Waddle's value is going to be a humongous debate for redraft fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football all the way up until we see kickoff for this season in September. I think this is going to be a very highly debated topic. Jaylen Waddle obviously played great last year in his rookie year, and he looked like he was going to be in the perfect position with Mike McDaniel to potentially be put in this quote-unquote Deebo Samuel role. Now, I'm not telling you that Jaylen Waddle is exactly Deebo Samuel because it's hard to come upon an athlete like Deebo Samuel, but based upon what we saw in San Francisco with Mike McDaniel calling the plays, it seemed as though Jaylen Waddle was going to be used as more of a quote-unquote athlete, right? They're going to hand him the ball out of the backfield. They're going to create these plays, these screens, all types of shit, jet sweeps to get Jaylen Waddle the ball. But now they bring in Tyreek Hill. And based upon what I have read, it seems like now that role, the quote-unquote Deebo Samuel role, has now been given to Tyreek Hill. Now, you would have to be a little bit stupid to really believe that they're going to turn him into Deebo Samuel, right? Why would that be stupid? Because he's Tyreek Hill. He has his own special abilities. So he's not just going to become Deebo Samuel 2.0. He's already the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL for a reason, right? Because he's Tyreek Hill. But that will certainly Tyreek Hill will definitely be taking away some value from Jaylen Waddle. But at the end of the day, I am still going to bang the drums for Jaylen Waddle. Now, for the next couple of years with Tyreek Hill there, can Jaylen Waddle be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football? In my opinion, probably not. Probably not. But people that are taking his name and dropping him outside of the top 12 in redraft or in dynasty fantasy football is going to look very stupid. In my opinion, even with Tyreek Hill there, I think this offense is going to look a lot better in 2022. I really do think that Tua Tagovailoa is going to take that next step, and Jaylen Waddle will have an excellent season, even with Tyreek Hill. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think about Jaylen Waddle now with Tyreek Hill there, because it is a very interesting topic. And again, I think I'm probably going to talk about this a million times by the time we get to the start of the season, the kickoff in September. But before we get on into the next young wide receiver, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor. You guessed it, they're on your screen. They've been on your screen the whole video, UnderDog Fantasy, and they are known for their NFL best ball tournaments. However, UnderDog does not stop there. UnderDog has plenty of other contests for you to compete in, including live draft contests and pick'ems, in which you can make up to 20 times your entry fee. Use promo code Awesemo. Again, promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 and get started today on UnderDog Fantasy. Again, promo code Awesemo for up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. So the next wide receiver to discuss here, everyone's already talked a lot about T. Higgins, Jaylen Waddle. So now we're diving a little bit deeper into Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, the youngest on this list so far at 22 years old. In 2021, he did only play in 10 games after he got hurt very early on in last season. He was the wide receiver number 90 in half PPR and the wide receiver number 71 in half PPR points per game, tied with Randall Cobb, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Mecole Hardman, and Robbie Anderson. He had 56 targets on the season, 5.6 per game, ranking 84th at wide receiver, 38 receptions, 3.8 per game, 71st at wide receiver, 467 receiving yards, 46.7 per game, ranking 74th at wide receiver, and he had 0 total tugs on the season. Robert Kraft would be very disappointed with the fact that he had no tugs last season. Get it? So, when it comes to Jerry Jeudy, his situation was flipped upside down like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like Will Smith, okay? His situation was down astronomical, right? He went from having, like, you thought, you know what, maybe he could do it with Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, right? And then it really, last year, it was very apparent that that was not going to be the case, right? That while Jerry Jeudy is this, I almost said phenomenal, this terrific, this amazing athlete out of college, maybe things weren't going to be so sweet in the NFL because of the fact that Horsecock Drew Lock or Teddy Roosevelt, Teddy Bridgewater were throwing him the ball. But now, it's not those guys. Now, I am actually a Drew Lock apologist. I still think Drew Lock could be good in the NFL, but in reality, let's be honest here, Drew Lock kind of sucks. So going from Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater to Russell Wilson is amazing. Now, I have not been quoted even on this YouTube channel as being the biggest fan of Russell Wilson, but at the end of the day, going from Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater to Russell Wilson is a humongous leap positively for Jerry Jeudy. Now, I think that a lot of people, and based upon what I have read, have been really, really high on Courtland Sutton. Now, Courtland Sutton's done it at the NFL level. So there's definitely reasons to like Courtland Sutton. So I'm not going to deny that Courtland Sutton couldn't have a great season, but Jerry Jeudy has all of the athletic measurables to be an alpha wide receiver in the NFL and to completely dominate with Russell Wilson as his quarterback. This Denver Broncos team is very legit. But Nick, they're in the AFC West. The AFC West is going to be very tough, and I understand it's going to be very tough, but at the end of the day here, when you have a talent like Jerry Jeudy with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, you just have to be high on Jerry Jeudy. For Dynasty Fantasy Football, this is amazing. For redraft, this is great as well. This is amazing. I really think Jerry Jeudy does have the upside to be a top 12 wide receiver. Am I going to rank him there? Of course not, because there's so many wide receivers that you could throw into the top 12, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. Flash forward, we're sitting here in January talking about what happened throughout the 2022 season. If Jerry Jeudy was a top 12, a top 5 name, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Next up, we move to DeVonta Smith, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles, 23 years old for Mr. DeVonta Smith. In 2021, he played a full slate of games, playing in all 17 games, finishing as the wide receiver number 29 in half PPR and the wide receiver number 40 in half PPR points per game. Yikes, tied with Kendrick Bourne. 103 targets on the season, 6.1 per game, ranking 32nd at wide receiver, 64 receptions, 3.8 per game, ranking 34th at wide receiver, 916 receiving yards, 53.9 per game, ranking 26th at wide receiver, and 5 total touchdowns, ranking 33rd at wide receiver. So DeVonta Smith, coming into the 2021 NFL season, I really like DeVonta Smith. Now, I understand that people make fun of his build, and there was a lot of talk last year. DeVonta Smith is built like a fucking skeleton. He's built like Kevin Durant. He's not going to be able to play all 17 games. Blah, 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 blah. It's different at the NFL level, man. He's not going to be able to do it. He's going to get hurt. He's brittle. That's what they were saying. And they were wrong about that. He played all 17 games, but he wasn't great, right? Wide receiver 29 is nothing amazing when you play 17 games. Wide receiver 40 in half PPR points per game. That's not getting me salivating here to draft DeVonta Smith in 2022 and in Dynasty Fantasy Football. But the situation, it seems like the Philadelphia Eagles understand what to do, how to build an offense. And that's very clear, how to build a team. And that was made very clear by yesterday's trade with the New Orleans Saints. But the biggest question mark with DeVonta Smith doesn't have to deal with his skill. It has to deal with the quarterback situation. Because while I personally believe that Jalen Hurts is a legitimate NFL quarterback, last year I said some things about him where I liked him for fantasy football. Like, I'm ready to draft him, but I'm not excited about what he is as an NFL quarterback, because just because you're a great fantasy football quarterback doesn't mean you're a great NFL quarterback. Just like because you're a great fantasy running back doesn't necessarily mean you're a great NFL running back. Same thing with wide receiver, tight end, all of that. Now, Jalen Hurts seems like he is on, like, very, not the best terms, like thin air, is that the correct term? But he seems like he is really not in the best spot with the Eagles, meaning I feel like if Jalen Hurts doesn't ball out, that the team might just draft a new quarterback in 2023. Now, is that positive or negative for DeVonta Smith? Who knows, right? Maybe DeVonta Smith would be better with a brand new quarterback that they end up drafting. Or maybe DeVonta Smith is better with Jalen Hurts. And that is to be seen, obviously, in the future. But DeVonta Smith, a lot like Jerry Jeudy, does have the athletic measurables. DeVonta Smith is fast as fuck and is clearly the wide receiver one in Philadelphia right now prior to the NFL draft. So my belief here is that DeVonta Smith will continue to be the alpha wide receiver on the team. Jalen Hurts isn't the greatest quarterback in the NFL, but he can get it done for DeVonta Smith. So Smith's a guy that I definitely would rank outside the top 24 in Dynasty as well as in redraft. But he is a wide receiver that has a lot of big play upside. And if he gets the touchdowns up, he only scored 5 touchdowns last year. If he scores 8 or 9 touchdowns, could definitely be a top 15, top 16 wide receiver going forward for the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, we move to a wide receiver who I have definitely not spread a lot of positivity towards, and it has nothing to do with his talent. It's just my very strong belief that he's on the Jets, right? Elijah Moore, wide receiver of the New York Football Jets, 22 years old. Last year only played in 11 games. Wide receiver, 48.5 PPR, 31.5 PPR points per game, 77 targets, 7 per game, 49th at wide receiver, 43 receptions, 3.9 per game, 58th at wide receiver, 538 receiving yards, 48.9 per game, 61st at wide receiver, and 6 total touchdowns, 20th at wide receiver. Elijah Moore profiles to be the number one in New York. Now, there's a lot of rumbles going around, a lot of talk, rumors going around that the New York Jets are aggressively on the phone, right? We read about the fact that it seemed like the Jets were very in on Tyreek Hill. It seems like they're in on Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, they're in on DK Metcalf. Basically, any wide receiver that isn't old as fuck, the Jets have been calling teams to go ahead and acquire them. Now, my personal belief is unless they're giving them the mother load, I don't know why the Seahawks are trading DK Metcalf. I don't know why the 49ers would trade Deebo Samuel. I have no idea why the Titans would trade A.J. Brown. No idea, unless, of course, the Jets do something fucking crazy. They're like, hey, here's 3 first-round picks for this guy, right? Now, if that doesn't happen, which is my assumption, right? I don't think they're going to be able to get one of these wide receivers. Then it seems very probable that they take another swing in the draft and draft another wide receiver. Now, does that necessarily derail Elijah Moore? No. But it doesn't feel as though Elijah Moore has that safety to be the clear head honcho, the clear lead alpha wide receiver for the Jets. And even if he becomes the number 2, that's fine. But I think a lot of people are very high on Elijah Moore, despite the fact that Zach Wilson didn't really show much last year. Now, I'm not a Zach Wilson hater. I'm a Dolphins fan, so I hope Zach Wilson sucks when he plays the Dolphins, but at the end of the day, I have nothing against the guy. I hope he plays well. I liked him coming out of college out of BYU, so I think that he could be a great quarterback, but I haven't seen anything out of him. The offensive line, suspect. They did shore up the offensive line, so it should be better, but the Jets seem to be cursed. It seems like when Joe Namath won that Super Bowl, when he declared that they were going to win that Super Bowl and then won the Super Bowl, he laid some type of fucking voodoo curse on the Jets. Because it seems like every year they pay up big for this player, and the player either sucks or they get hurt. So it seems like I'm pretty... Now again, Nick, how fucking... You might be thinking... Nick, why are you talking about curses? We're talking about fantasy football. Because I am legitimately worried that the Jets organization is cursed and that Elijah Moore is going to stink. Now, again, Elijah Moore's a great player. I'm just a little bit lower than the consensus. Seems like most people got Elijah Moore in Dynasty top 18 wide receiver. I wouldn't rank him there. But that's just kind of my feelings on him. Next up, before we move on to the honorable mentions, we got the final wide receiver that we're going to be going in depth with in this video, and that is Mr. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions, 22 years old. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown, out of all of these wide receivers, now I'm pretty high on, I like all of them, right? Again, not super high on Elijah Moore or DeVonta Smith, but I definitely like them. Like, I'm not going to tell you that they're going to be complete and utter busts. But when it comes to just really... Like, besides Jaylen Waddle, the guy who I was really banging the drum for is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 22 years old, Detroit Lions. Now, when it comes to Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think I might need to pump the brakes a little bit. Now, this doesn't mean that I think this guy is going to fall off the edge of the earth in 2022 and going forward, but I do need to somewhat temper my expectations because... Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe the way I came off in the other videos where I talked about him, that maybe I just believed that this guy was really going to be a top 12 player. Now, I never said that. I never really said that. Always locked and loaded to be a top 12 wide receiver. But I talked about how he really has that upside. But I am pretty sold in at this point that they are going to draft another wide receiver. Now, they signed DJ Moore to a one-year deal. That made a bunch of people panic. Start getting a little bit sweaty. Thinking, oh, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown's done for, blah, blah, blah. That's going to do nothing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. But what I would worry about is them bringing in another wide receiver in the draft, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of goes back to that 2 role on the team, and if he's not getting a shit ton of targets, maybe he's not as great, right? 2021, plays in 17 games, but he only started 9 games, so... Not too shabby, obviously, for how he played. Wide receiver 21.5 PPR, wide receiver 30.5 PPR points per game. But the reason why I bring up the 9 starts is because he wasn't really playing 17 games, right? So his points per game finish is a little bit negatively skewed. As wide receiver 30, 119 targets, 7.0 per game, 23rd at wide receiver, 90 receptions, 5.3 per game, 13th at wide receiver, 912 receiving yards, 53.6 per game, 27th at wide receiver, and 6 total touchdowns, 20th at wide receiver. So St. Brown is a wide receiver, like I said, that I believe in. I think his targets share in the offense is going to go down. I don't expect him, like, down the stretch of the season, where we saw this motherfucker get, like, 10-plus targets a game. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that he could easily get 7 targets a game, come down with 6 receptions a game, right? Have 1,000-plus yards, score maybe 7-8 touchdowns, and have a great year. The quarterback situation in Detroit is also out of whack, right? It's Jared Goff right now. A few weeks from now in the NFL draft, it might be Malik Willis, Matt Corral, or maybe they just roll with Jared Goff again. Tank for someone else, right? Fuck it, right? Jared Goff, this team is very out of contention. They have a good head coach, in my opinion. I like their head coach. I like the player Amon-Ra St. Brown, but we can't expect what we saw at the end of the season to occur again in 2022 and beyond. To infinity and beyond, like a Buzz Lightyear. I don't expect him to see that ridiculous amount of targets. Again, not to demean Amon-Ra St. Brown, just to understand the situation he was in last year and how it's going to be different going forward. So again, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's in a alright situation despite the team sucking donkey cock. I just don't love the fact that I just know that he's not going to be getting that amount of targets. I just think it's set in stone that he's not going to be able to get 10, 11, 12 targets a game. That should be obvious. But I think a lot of people might overlook that. So the honorable mentions of today's video, wide receivers that I want to talk about for just a couple of seconds, but didn't really crack the video, right? I didn't want this video to be 40 minutes long. So honorable mentions, Gabriel Davis of the Buffalo Bills, 23 years old. Cole Beasley's gone. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Gabe Davis might be the wide receiver 2 there in Buffalo. Gotta wait for the draft. But Gabe Davis is phenomenal. He's a great player. If they don't draft anyone, then I'm going to be just ecstatic about Gabe Davis. Next up, Kadarius Toney, New York Giants, 23 years old, shitty quarterback. Who knows about the coach? But Kadarius Toney showed a lot last year. He beat the shit out of some guy. If you remember in the Dallas Cowboys game, they had a nice tussle. Fought well. Doesn't really add much to your fantasy league unless you're in a points per fight league, but not sure those exist. They definitely don't exist. But Kadarius Toney definitely showed a lot to me last season that he is talented. The quarterback situation there sucks, but he is the number 1 guy there. And then Rashad Bateman switches his number from 12 to 7. I like that. Number 7 looks quick. I don't necessarily like the small numbers for receivers, but at this point, I've just adjusted my brain to the fact that it's going to look a lot more like college out there. 22 years old for Rashad Bateman. Amazing talent, amazing speed. One of those guys that, to me, is just, you draft him. If you somehow sniff out the right matchup, you play him. He might score 40 fucking points. But he also might score 0. He's not very high up on the depth chart, meaning in terms of targets, you would think he's probably number 3 or 4, right? You've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Mark Andrews, you got J.K. Dobbins. So he might be like number 4 in the pecking role, but he's still talented. He's still got the talent, and maybe he's able to really take that next leap. He was banged up last season. Take that next leap in his sophomore year. That is entirely possible, so I definitely wanted to bring him up. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Let me know who your favorite young wide receiver is that I included in today's video, but we're not including all of them, so probably T. Higgins or Jaylen Waddle might be your favorite. Don't include them. So who's your favorite young wide receiver? Is it Jeudy? Is it DeVonta Smith? Is it Elijah Moore? Is it Amon-Ra St. Brown? Or maybe it's one of the wide receivers that I did not mention in today's video. Let me know down below in the comment section. Please make sure that if you did end up enjoying, that you hit that like button, you hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. And please make sure that you help out, or check out, I should say, even help them out, by clicking on their website. Head on over to UnderDog Fantasy. Again, they're known for their best ball tournaments. However, it doesn't stop there. You can play in a bunch of other contests as well, including live draft contests and pickups, in which you can make up to 20x your entry fee. Use promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. Again, promo code Awesemo on your screen right here to get a first deposit match bonus of up to $100. Get started on UnderDog Fantasy today. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. As always, guys, goodbye.